Her human mate seemed fragile, but he proved his strength in private. First impressions and dismissal. Lyria Thorne stood at the edge of the assembly hall, her posture radiating the confidence of someone who had never lost a battle. Her people, the Iridians, were legendary throughout the Coalition territories. Warriors whose reflexes and endurance surpassed nearly every known species. She rolled her shoulders, feeling the familiar weight of her ceremonial armor, and surveyed the crowd with barely concealed impatience. This summit was supposed to be an honor. Instead, it felt like a waste of her talents. Lyria Thorne. A soft voice interrupted her thoughts. She turned to find a human standing before her, holding a data tablet against his chest like a shield. He was slender, with gentle brown eyes and an uncertain smile that made him look younger than he probably was. His clothing was simple, practical, nothing like the reinforced gear any sensible explorer would wear. Marcus Webb, he introduced himself, extending his hand. I'm your assigned partner for the Verdalis Forest research mission. Lyria stared at his hand for a moment before accepting it briefly. His grip was warm but lacking the crushing strength she expected from a partner. She released it quickly. A human, she said flatly. They assigned me a human. Marcus's smile faltered slightly, but he maintained his composure. I'm a botanist and field medic. I've studied the Verdalis region extensively. I think we'll make a good team. I'm sure you've studied it, Lyria replied, crossing her arms. From the safety of a laboratory, no doubt. She didn't bother hiding the skepticism in her voice. The Verdalis forest was notoriously dangerous, filled with toxic flora and aggressive fauna. She'd requested a partner who could handle themselves in combat, not someone who looked like they'd never held a weapon. Actually, I've completed 3 field expeditions to hostile environments, Marcus said quietly, though something flickered in his eyes. Not anger, but a careful assessment. But I understand your concerns. I'll try not to slow you down. The diplomatic response only irritated her more. She preferred directness, confrontation, not this soft-spoken accommodation. See that you don't, she said curtly. We leave at dawn. Bring whatever equipment you need, but pack light. I won't be carrying extra weight. Marcus nodded, his expression unreadable now. Understood. I'll meet you at the transport platform. As he walked away, Lyria watched him navigate through the crowd, noting how easily people overlooked him, how he seemed to deliberately take up minimal space. Everything about him screamed fragility, caution, weakness, all the things she'd been trained to despise. She sighed heavily, already dreading the mission ahead. How was she supposed to conduct serious research while babysitting someone who probably couldn't even run a mile without collapsing? The coalition leaders clearly had no idea what they were doing with these partnership assignments. That night, Lyria reviewed the mission parameters in her quarters, her mind repeatedly returning to the problem of Marcus Webb. She'd have to establish protocols immediately, keep him at the center of camp, assign him tasks that kept him away from danger, maybe even complete the most critical research herself. She pulled up his file on her display, expecting to find exactly what she'd assumed: limited field experience, mostly academic achievements, probably assigned to her as some kind of diversity initiative. But as she scrolled through his record, something gave her pause. 3 expeditions, as he'd said, but not to easy locations. The Corvan wastelands. The frozen reaches of Theta Station. The subterranean networks of Kelly's Prime. Each one rated as high risk. Each one completed successfully, with his previous teams noting his contributions. Lyria frowned at the screen. Perhaps there was more to this human than his appearance suggested. But she'd learned long ago not to trust reports over her own observations. Paper credentials meant nothing in the field when danger struck. She closed the file and prepared her equipment for the morning, already planning how she'd handle every likely scenario they'd face. Whatever happened in the Verdalis forest, she would keep them both alive, even if it meant doing everything herself. Dawn would tell her everything she needed to know about Marcus Webb. Unexpected competence. The transport dropped them at the forest's edge just as the twin suns broke over the horizon. Lyria stepped onto the mossy ground, immediately scanning for threats while Marcus gathered their supplies. She expected him to struggle with the heavy packs, but he shouldered his equipment with practiced efficiency and fell into step beside her without complaint. The verderless forest was beautiful and deadly in equal measure. Bioluminescent vines hung from ancient trees, their glow masking the acidic sap that could burn through skin. The air hummed with insect life, some harmless, others carrying paralytic venom. Lyria moved with the fluid grace of a predator, every sense alert. She glanced back periodically, expecting to find Marcus lagging behind or stumbling over roots. Instead, he maintained a steady pace, his eyes constantly moving across the vegetation with an intensity she hadn't anticipated. When she paused to check her navigation device, he crouched beside a cluster of purple flowers. "Don't touch those," Lyria warned sharply. "I won't," Marcus replied calmly, pulling out a small scanner. "These are night veil blossoms. Their pollen causes respiratory paralysis. But if we need to cross through this area regularly, I can synthesize a protective agent from those leaves over there." He pointed to a seemingly ordinary plant several feet away. Lyria blinked, reassessing. "You can identify species on sight." "Most of them. I spent 6 months studying verderless ecology before this mission." He stood, brushing dirt from his knees. "The forest has a delicate balance. Understanding it keeps you alive better than any weapon." She wanted to argue that weapons had kept her alive just fine, but something in his quiet confidence made her hold her tongue. They continued deeper into the forest, and Lyria began noticing Marcus's small actions, steering them away from certain paths, making marks on his tablet, occasionally collecting samples with careful precision. By midday, they'd established a base camp in a clearing Marcus had selected. Lyria had been ready to choose a defensible position on higher ground, but Marcus had quietly suggested this spot instead, explaining that the particular combination of plants created a natural barrier against most predators. "The scent confuses their tracking senses," he explained while setting up his research station. "We'll be safer here than on exposed terrain." Lyria found herself watching him work, noting the methodical way he organized their supplies, the care he took with each instrument. When she began assembling her equipment, a sharp branch scraped across her forearm, leaving a burning cut. She hissed at the unexpected pain. The wood must have been coated in something toxic. Marcus looked up immediately. "Let me see." "It's nothing," Lyria said automatically, pressing her hand against the wound. But the burning intensified, spreading up her arm. Marcus was beside her in seconds, his medical kit already open. "That's razor brush. The sap contains a mild neurotoxin. If we don't neutralize it, your whole arm will go numb." His hands were steady as he cleaned the wound, his touch surprisingly gentle. "This will sting for a moment." He applied a pale green paste he'd apparently prepared earlier, and Lyria felt the burning sensation immediately subside. She watched his face as he worked, the slight furrow of concentration between his brows, the competent sureness of his movements. This wasn't the fumbling scholar she'd expected. "Where did you learn field medicine?" she asked. "Necessity," Marcus replied, wrapping her arm with clean bandaging. "When you're the physically weakest member of an expedition team, you find other ways to be valuable. Being able to keep everyone healthy seemed important." He met her eyes briefly, and she saw something there, not resentment, but a quiet acknowledgement of reality. "Thank you," Lyria said, the words feeling awkward in her mouth. She wasn't accustomed to needing help. Marcus smiled, the expression transforming his face. "You're welcome. Try to avoid the plants with the reddish bark. Most of them are bad news." That evening, as they sat around a small thermal lamp, open fires being too dangerous in this environment, Lyria found herself asking questions. Marcus answered each one thoughtfully, sharing stories of Earth's diverse ecosystems, the challenges humans had overcome despite their physical limitations. "We're not strong like your people," Marcus admitted, stirring the nutrient packs they were heating for dinner. "But humans are adaptable. We learn. We observe. We find solutions that don't require winning through force." He paused, glancing at her. "Though I'll admit, having someone with your combat skills is reassuring out here." Lyria felt something shift in her chest, a crack in the wall of assumptions she'd built. "You're not what I expected," she said finally. "Few people are," Marcus replied gently. "If we only see what we expect to see, we miss everything interesting." As darkness fully settled over the forest and strange calls echoed through the trees, Lyria watched the human across from her, cataloguing plants on his tablet with unwavering focus. Perhaps this mission wouldn't be the burden she'd anticipated. Perhaps there were different kinds of strength worth recognizing. She settled back against her pack, feeling the steady throb of her healing arm, and allowed herself the smallest smile. Trials and growing respect. The attack came on their fourth night, when Lyria's guard was finally starting to lower. She woke to the sound of movement in the underbrush, too deliberate to be wind, too large to be harmless. Her hand found her blade instantly as she rolled to her feet, positioning herself between the threat and Marcus's sleeping form. 3 pairs of luminescent eyes gleamed from the darkness. Thornback prowlers, pack hunters with razor-sharp quills and enough intelligence to coordinate attacks. Lyria's pulse quickened with the familiar rush of impending combat. She'd faced worse, but never while protecting someone else. "Marcus," she hissed. "Stay down and don't move. I'm awake." His voice came from behind her, steady despite the danger. Thornbacks hunt by motion and body heat. They're territorial, not hungry. We must be near a den. "Then they won't leave until we do," Lyria growled as the creatures began circling. She counted at least 5 now, probably more in the shadows. Too many to fight while keeping Marcus safe. "Their quills are their primary weapon," Marcus continued, and she heard rustling as he moved. "But they're highly sensitive to certain chemical compounds. The mistwater plants we passed earlier, they hate the smell." "This isn't the time for a biology lesson," Lyria snapped, tracking the alpha's movements. "Actually, it's the perfect time." Suddenly Marcus was beside her, holding several crushed plants that released a pungent, acrid odor. "Trust me." The word hung between them for a heartbeat. Then Lyria nodded sharply, adjusting her stance to cover his flank as he moved toward the perimeter of their camp. The thornbacks snarled, muscles tensing to spring. Marcus began spreading the crushed plant mixture in a circle around their camp, his movements quick but controlled. The nearest prowler lunged, and Lyria met it with her blade, feeling the satisfying impact as she deflected it away. Another came from the side, and she spun, her superior speed allowing her to strike before it reached Marcus. But then something unexpected happened. The prowlers began retreating, shaking their heads and backing away from the scent Marcus had created. The alpha made one final aggressive display before turning and disappearing into the forest, its pack following. Lyria stood frozen, blade ready, waiting for another attack. None came. The forest settled back into its normal rhythmic sounds. "They're gone," Marcus said quietly, lowering his makeshift chemical defense. She turned to stare at him, breathing hard. How did you know that would work?" "I didn't, completely." He met her gaze, and she saw something new there, not fear of what had just happened, but the same calm assessment he'd shown since they'd arrived. "But I've studied their behavioral patterns. The risk seemed acceptable." "Acceptable?" Lyria's voice rose despite herself. "You could have been killed." "I could have." She stopped, surprised by the intensity of her own reaction. Marcus stepped closer, his eyes searching her face in the dim light. "But I wasn't. And neither were you. We worked together." He touched her arm lightly, the one he'd treated days ago. "You protected me while I implemented the solution. That's partnership." Retry 4 to 5 parts. Lyria's breath caught at his touch, suddenly hyper-aware of how close he stood, of the warmth radiating from his body in the cool night air. Her people didn't fear much, but the vulnerability she felt in this moment was entirely new. "You should have told me your plan first," she said, but the reproach lacked heat. "Would you have let me try it?" Marcus asked, a hint of amusement in his voice. She opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. He was right. She would have insisted on a purely defensive approach, retreating from their carefully chosen camp, losing days of research. Instead, his knowledge had saved them both. "No," she admitted finally. "I wouldn't have." They stood there in the darkness, neither moving away. Lyria felt her heartbeat slowing, the adrenaline fading, replaced by something warmer and more complicated. Marcus's hand still rested on her arm, and she realized she didn't want him to move it. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. For underestimating you. For assuming you'd be a burden. Marcus smiled, that gentle expression that somehow made her feel both exposed and safe. I'm used to being underestimated. It's useful sometimes. People don't see you as a threat, so they don't guard themselves. You learn more that way. Is that what you've been doing? Learning about me? Maybe, he admitted, his thumb absently tracing small circles on her arm. You're fascinating, Lyria. All that strength and skill, but also, you care. You've been trying to protect me since we arrived, even though you thought I was weak. That says more about you than your combat abilities. Lyria felt heat rise to her face, grateful for the darkness hiding her reaction. No one had ever called her fascinating before. Formidable, yes. Dangerous, certainly. But fascinating implied he'd been paying attention to more than just her obvious qualities. You should rest, she said, not trusting herself to say more. I'll take the watch. We could both stay up, Marcus suggested softly. Talk for a while. Unless you'd prefer solitude. She should prefer solitude. She'd always preferred solitude. But looking at Marcus in the dim glow of their lamp, seeing the intelligence and courage behind his gentle exterior, Lyria found she wanted nothing less. Talk, she agreed, settling back down. Tell me more about Earth. About what made you want to leave it. Marcus sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched, and began to speak. His voice wove stories of a world so different from her own, a planet where humans thrived not through individual strength but collective ingenuity, where weakness became motivation for innovation, where compassion was valued as highly as courage. As the night deepened and strange constellations wheeled overhead, Lyria listened and watched, feeling the careful walls she'd built around herself beginning to crumble. Marcus Webb was dangerous after all, just not in any way she'd anticipated. When he finally paused, she reached out and took his hand, threading her fingers through his. He looked at their joined hands, then up at her face, questions in his eyes. Thank you, she said simply. For tonight. For all of it. Marcus squeezed her hand gently. We make a good team. Yes, Lyria agreed, her voice soft with wonder. We do. Emotional revelations. The storm struck without warning on their 7th day, turning the forest into a chaos of wind and rain. Lyria grabbed their essential equipment while Marcus secured the research samples, both working with practiced coordination. Lightning cracked across the sky, illuminating the forest in stark white flashes. There! Marcus shouted over the wind, pointing toward a dark opening in a nearby cliff face. Cave system. We need shelter now. They ran, heads down against the driving rain, and stumbled into the cave entrance just as another lightning strike split a tree where they'd been standing moments before. The sound was deafening, the smell of ozone and burning wood filling the air. Inside the cave, they collapsed against the stone wall, soaked and breathing hard. Lyria quickly assessed their situation, deep enough to be safe from the storm, dry, and showing no signs of current habitation by anything dangerous. Not ideal, but survivable. Are you hurt? She asked Marcus, running her eyes over him critically. Just wet and cold, he replied, already pulling out his emergency supplies. But hypothermia is a real risk. We need to get warm and dry. They worked efficiently, changing into dry clothes from their packs and setting up their thermal lamp. The cave was small, forcing them to sit close together, but Lyria found she didn't mind. Over the past week, proximity to Marcus had become comfortable, even desired. Outside, the storm raged with increasing fury. Thunder rolled across the forest in waves, rain hammering the ground so hard it created a constant roar. We might be here a while, Marcus observed, wrapping a thermal blanket around his shoulders. He glanced at Lyria. Want to share? We'll stay warmer. She nodded, moving closer as he extended the blanket to envelope them both. Their bodies pressed together, sharing heat, and Lyria felt that now familiar flutter in her chest that Marcus's nearness created. Tell me something true, she said quietly, watching the storm's fury through the cave entrance. Something you haven't told anyone else. Marcus was silent for a long moment, and she felt him tense slightly against her. When he finally spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. I had a family once. A wife, a daughter. He paused, and Lyria's breath caught. There was an outbreak on our colony, a viral infection we didn't know how to treat. I was away on a research expedition. By the time I got back... He stopped, swallowing hard. I was too late. My knowledge, all my training, and I couldn't save them. Lyria turned to look at him, seeing tears glisten in his eyes. Without thinking, she reached up and cupped his face gently. Marcus, I'm so sorry. That's why I do this work, he continued, his voice barely above a whisper. Every plant I catalogue, every remedy I discover, it's my way of making sure what happened to them doesn't happen to someone else. If I can help others survive, maybe. He trailed off, the sentence unfinished but its meaning clear. Maybe it gives their deaths meaning, Lyria finished softly. Marcus nodded, leaning into her touch. You understand. I do. She took a breath, feeling the weight of her own secret. I've never told anyone this, but I'm afraid all the time. Every mission, every fight, I'm terrified I won't be strong enough, fast enough. My people expect perfection. Warriors who show weakness are dismissed, forgotten. So I never show it. I never let anyone see that underneath all this strength, I'm just scared. Marcus's hand came up to cover hers, still pressed against his cheek. Lyria, being afraid doesn't make you weak. Acting despite that fear, that's what makes you strong. Real strength isn't the absence of vulnerability. It's having the courage to be vulnerable anyway. Something broke open in Lyria's chest, years of carefully maintained armor cracking apart. How do you do that? She whispered. How do you see things so clearly? I've lost everything that made me feel invincible, Marcus replied. When you have nothing left to protect except your purpose, clarity comes easier. He turned slightly, their faces now inches apart. But being here with you, I'm starting to feel something I thought I'd never feel again. What? Lyria asked, though her heart already knew the answer. Hope. Connection. The possibility that maybe I don't have to carry everything alone anymore. Retry Claude can make mistakes. Please double-check responses. A new understanding. The storm passed by morning, leaving the forest washed clean and glistening. Something fundamental had shifted between them in that cave, a barrier crossed that neither could retreat from. They worked side by side with new ease over the following days, their movements synchronized. When Marcus reached for a sample container, Lyria already had it ready. When Lyria needed information about a plant's properties, Marcus provided it before she finished asking. On their final night before returning to the summit, Lyria found Marcus sitting at the edge of their camp, studying the stars. She settled beside him, their shoulders touching. I don't want this to end, she said quietly. Marcus turned to her, his eyes reflecting starlight. The mission, or us? Both. Either. Lyria felt uncharacteristically uncertain. When we go back, you'll return to your research facilities, and I'll be assigned to another combat mission. We'll be separated, and I've never felt this way before. Like I found something I didn't know I was missing. Then don't let it end, Marcus said simply. He took her hand, threading their fingers together. Lyria, I never expected to find you. Someone who challenges me, protects me, but also sees me, really sees who I am beyond the surface. You did the same for me, she admitted. You showed me that strength comes in forms I never recognized. That I don't have to be perfect and alone. She squeezed his hand. You showed me what partnership really means. Marcus lifted their joined hands, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. So what do we do about it? We choose each other, she said. I'll request assignment to the Research Protection Division. They always need security personnel for field expeditions. Your expeditions specifically. You'd give up frontline combat missions? Marcus asked, surprise evident in his voice. I'm not giving up anything. I'm choosing something better. Fighting beside you, protecting you while you do work that actually saves lives, that's more meaningful than any glory. She turned to face him fully. Unless you don't want. Marcus silenced her with a kiss, gentle at first, then deepening as she responded. His hand cradled the back of her head, and Lyria felt herself melting into him, all her warrior's discipline dissolving under the tenderness of his touch. When they pulled apart, both breathing unsteadily, Marcus rested his forehead against hers. I want you, this, us, all of it. I thought I'd lost my chance at happiness, but you've shown me I was wrong. They stayed under the stars, wrapped in each other's arms, talking quietly about the future they would build together. Marcus described expeditions he'd planned, dangerous, important work that would need exactly Lyria's abilities. Lyria shared her dreams of becoming more than just a fighter. My people won't understand at first, Lyria admitted. They'll think I'm wasting my potential on a human partner. Let them wonder. We know the truth, Marcus replied with a smile. Which is? That we're stronger together than we ever were apart. That love, he paused, the word hanging between them. Love, Lyria repeated softly. The word had always seemed like weakness before, but feeling it now, holding Marcus close, she understood it differently. Love wasn't weakness. It was courage. Yes, she confirmed. Love. Marcus kissed her again, slow and deep, and Lyria surrendered to it completely. His hands traced gentle patterns on her back while she pulled him closer, marveling at how perfectly they fit together despite their differences. When they settled down to sleep, wrapped together under the thermal blanket, Lyria felt a peace she'd never known. Marcus's heartbeat was steady against her ear, and she understood that this connection was what she'd been trained to protect all along. The summit hall buzzed with activity as teams presented their findings. When Lyria and Marcus took their turn, Lyria stood tall at the podium. Our mission exceeded all expectations, Lyria began. But not for the reasons I anticipated. I went into this partnership with assumptions about human fragility. My partner proved me wrong in every way. She gestured to Marcus. Marcus Webb's expertise, courage, and quick thinking saved both our lives multiple times. He taught me that intelligence, compassion, and adaptability are just as valuable as combat prowess. Perhaps more so. Murmurs rippled through the audience, surprise from her fellow Eridians, appreciation from the human contingent. We're requesting continued partnership for future expeditions. I'm formally transferring to the Research Protection Division. After the presentation, as colleagues swarmed them with questions, Lyria caught Marcus's eye across the crowd. He smiled at her, that gentle, knowing smile that meant everything, and mouthed, "Thank you." She shook her head slightly. "Thank you," she mouthed back. That evening, alone in Marcus's quarters, they celebrated quietly. He'd prepared a simple meal, and they ate together, laughing and talking about their future. "So we're really doing this?" Lyria asked, taking his hand across the table. "If you want to," Marcus replied, bringing her hand to his lips. "I want to," she confirmed, moving closer. "I've never been more sure of anything." They came together naturally, kisses deepening as they moved to his sleeping area. Marcus touched her with careful attention, learning what made her gasp. Lyria explored him with growing confidence, amazed by his responsiveness. When they finally joined together, it felt like completion, two people from different worlds finding home in each other. They moved in harmony, building toward a crescendo that left them both breathless and clinging together. Afterward, wrapped in each other's arms, Lyria traced patterns on Marcus's chest. "This feels inevitable somehow." "Maybe it is," Marcus replied, kissing her forehead. "Maybe we were always meant to find each other." "What did I teach you?" Lyria asked. "That it's okay to hope again. To trust. To open my heart even though I'd lost so much." He tightened his arms around her. "You taught me that love makes us brave enough to build something new." Lyria felt tears prick her eyes. "And you taught me that true strength isn't about being invincible. It's about being real and brave enough to let someone see all of you." They lay together in comfortable silence as the station's artificial night deepened around them. "I love you," Marcus whispered. "I love you too," Lyria replied. And somewhere between the stars that separated their worlds, their future stretched out before them, full of adventures yet to come, challenges they would face together, and a love that had proven stronger than any prejudice. Lyria had learned that her human mate was anything but fragile where it truly mattered. And Marcus had discovered that the fierce warrior possessed a heart capable of profound tenderness. Together, they would explore not just distant worlds, but the infinite territory of two hearts learning to beat as one. The end.